The suburban Detroit homeowner who shot 19-year-old Renisha McBride on his porch in the middle of the night will face murder charges. 54-year-old Theodore Paul Wafer was arraigned Friday on second-degree murder, manslaughter, and felony use of a firearm charges. Based on the evidence, the prosecutor said that we do not believe he acted in lawful self-defense because he could not reasonably believe his life was in danger. Wafer is accused of shooting McBride in the face at about 3:40 a.m. as she stood on his home's porch after she had been involved in a single-car crash. She is said to have been looking for help. Wafer told police he thought someone was breaking in and accidentally fired his 12-gauge shotgun. But evidence released Friday suggests that Wafer opened the front door before he fired through the closed and locked screen door. Ron Scott is spokesman for the McBride family, and he joins us on the phone. Ron, we thank you so much for taking time with us. I do appreciate it.
Thank you.
I just wonder, what is the reaction of the family to Mr. Wafer finally being charged?
Well, I was on the phone with one of the family members, Vanita McBride, at the time that the charges were announced, and she said, "Thank you, Jesus. Thank you, God." And the mother and father later on at a news conference sort of echoed those claims, and they said that they're glad that the charges that were rendered, which are second-degree murder, manslaughter, and the commission of a felony with a firearm, that they were glad that this had happened. They were glad that Prosecutor Worthy had taken her time and done the work that was necessary to render these charges, and that they want the maximum limit of these charges to be upheld. They said he took a life, therefore he should give his life, and that they hope he will see and render some changes to his life in terms of killing this young woman. And they said they still cannot understand why he did this. They're looking for answers.
The charges came almost 2 weeks exactly after the tragic shooting. How high had the family's frustration level gotten as these 2 weeks wore on?
Well, you have to understand, this is a family that's a very spiritual family. They're a very close family. They were feeling very, obviously, in a state of grief as a result of this, but their resolve had not been diminished. They were still strong. And, in fact, Vanita McBride had told me that she had prayed and she had gotten an answer, and she knew that this would be the case. So evidently she knew something that the natural world didn't know, because she did this. But I felt, really, based on what had happened, that the prosecutor was going to move in this direction. She had, in fact, initiated her own independent investigation after the Dearborn Heights Police Department had done a tertiary investigation earlier. So I felt that the charges were going to be pretty much what they ended up being.
Can you tell me what the family's reaction has been on the release of the information from the autopsy report that Renita had a blood alcohol level 0.218, which is 3 times the legal limit and 10 times the limit for someone under the age of 21?
Well, you know, I work with the Detroit Coalition Against Police Brutality and Peace Zones for Life here in Detroit, and we've seen over the years criminalizing the victim. This is nothing but an attempt to criminalize the victim. By that standard, you know, every person who gets drunk on New Year's Eve should be shot? No, I don't think so. I think that Kim Worthy put it correctly. She said that statement was, and those things that were presented like that were irrelevant.
Do you think that the charges, now that they've been announced, will calm some of the tension? When we spoke to you just the other day, you talked about the community in some ways was like a tinderbox, a powder keg. Will this bring some calm, some relief to the tension?
Well, I think it'll bring some focus to the continued quest for justice. Just because the charges have been rendered, that does not mean that prosecution has occurred and a victory has been won in relationship to his sentencing and ultimate conviction. And the family is waiting for and looking for a conviction. Mr. Thurswell, Gerald Thurswell, who's their attorney, said, you know, that's basically what we're doing, is working on a conviction, or at least hoping for that. And the arraignment, or at least the preliminary exam and so forth, will be coming up very shortly. and the family will be in attendance at that, and we'll see where it goes from there.
Let me ask you about the gentleman that shot Renisha. Now his identity has been revealed because the charges have been made. Is there anything more that you can tell us about him? We know that he's 54 years old and he owned a shotgun. What else can you tell us about him?
He works at the Detroit Metropolitan Airport, and he has been working there for approximately 10 years. We don't know very much more about him in relationship to that. We do know that he had a couple of DUI charges maybe some 10, 15 years ago, and a stalking citation had been issued. Other than that, there's not much known about him at this particular point.
Do you think that this shooting might have, and this is purely, I'm asking you for speculation, so I freely acknowledge that, but Michigan is a stand-your-ground state. So let me ask it this way. What role do you think the fact that Michigan is stand-your-ground played in this tragic event?
Well, Ms. Worthy made it very clear that stand your ground was not a component of this, that the individual was safe. The elements of this case speak to the case that one has to feel threatened, and they have to be in a situation where there's imminent, and I use the term imminent, potential of death or injury. So there was no imminent situation here. He was in his home, behind closed doors, shot through a screen, had plenty of time to call the police or do what was necessary to protect himself. So, and even in that, she cited a court decision from 1966 in relationship to self-defense, wherein one can shoot someone to defend their life. And in that particular case, Renisha McBride had no weapon, nothing. There was nothing on the door or anything that indicated that she posed a threat to him at all. Therefore, that is null and void to make that kind of suggestion. And I want to add something, too. He suggests that the gun discharged by accident. I want to tell you about something that I've had occasion to shoot shotguns and other kinds of things for hunting. A shotgun has a safety on the trigger housing. A shotgun has trigger slack where you don't have to pull it all the way. So therefore, in addition, we talk about racial profiling. This was human profiling. You have to wonder what was in this man's heart and mind to sit there with a loaded shotgun, open the door, and then shoot through the door.
Indeed. Ron Scott, again, we thank you so much, and again, send our thoughts and condolences to the McBride family.
Oh, by the way, the McBride family wanted to let everybody in the media know that they have appreciated your focus on this, and they really are glad that the prayers of everybody throughout the country and the world have been given to them.
Thank you for passing that along. You take care.
Okay, bye.
Friday's charges and arraignment came after 2 weeks of concern by civil rights leaders, not only in the Detroit area, but across the country. For a reaction, Roz Edwards, a reporter for the Michigan Chronicle, joins us via Skype. Roz, hi, nice to meet you. Thanks for being on Arise America.
Thank you so much. It's good to be here.
As I imagine, I've been following the reporting of this story, not only nationally, but as it's been reported there in the Detroit area, and it seems like there has been this growing tension. Do these charges sort of dispel some of that tension now, Roz?
Well, while there's been growing tension, there's also been a good deal of really profound sadness in the community. When we first heard about the tragedy, like you said, almost 2 weeks ago to the day, there was this attitude or an air of shock and bewilderment. We couldn't quite understand what had happened. As details unfolded, the tension started to mount some. There were not overt calls or outcries in the street to take action, but there were some vigils and just a real urgency to get to the bottom of what happened. Since the charges have been brought today, there has been some relief to that tension, but that sadness still hangs over the city.
I'm sure that sadness is there. I wonder if there is some foreboding by some citizens that there might be a similar outcome as in the trial of George Zimmerman, where the shooter is exonerated of a crime.
That was probably the first thing that came to Detroiters' minds as we thought about Trayvon Martin and the Zimmerman outcome of that case. We are pretty confident, having been familiar with Kim Worthy, who's been a great prosecutor in this area for so long. I think they're pretty confident that we will come to a very different verdict in this case. and that there's not the issue of a struggle and who was actually heard on the tape. This was clearly a case of a 19-year-old woman seeking help and was met with that type of action. So we think that the expectation on this part is that justice will be served and that Mr. Wafer will be convicted on murder charges.
There have been some revelations about both of the people involved in this tragedy. First of all, that Renisha McBride had a very high blood alcohol level. Some reports have said there were traces of marijuana found in her blood. And then, of course, we just heard from Ron Scott, and it has been reported that Paul Wafer has had DUIs or DWIs in the past. These types of revelations, what kinds of comments or responses are you getting from citizens about these?
Well, I have to agree with Mr. Scott that that type of treatment of the victim cuts both ways. I understand that in the self-defense case that Mr. Wafer is now mounting, the fact that she did have a blood alcohol level of 0.218 and had apparently used marijuana could go well for his claim of self-defense. But I think more than anything, and being a reporter in the press here, there was more a sense of it added to the sadness and kind of a sense of outrage that frankly many of our viewers and readers saw this as kind of an attempt to blame the victim on a smokescreen to try and to ameliorate some of the charges or some of the Venus action directed toward Mr. Wafer. So it could cut both ways. I think on the legal end, it may go well for the defense, but on the other end, the case in the court of public sentiment, it was not appreciated, and I think it added a little bit, it fueled the fire and added a little bit to the outrage of residents in this city.
All right, we're going to have to stop right there, but thank you so much, Roz Edwards, for being with us. We do appreciate it.
Thank you.